Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah as you formerly know her, film critic at Eat Vibes Nation in Session Film and Movie John. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing actresses Alina Tamara, Sophie Ablett, and Kelsey Cooke on their new indie thriller The Quiet Ones. It feels like the Neon Demon meets The Craft meets like it's very inventive and an all-female cast doing all kinds of badass things. I loved it and I love the three of you so much. So thank you for talking to me.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, my first question will be, how did the film come to the three of you? Taking turns.
Who wants to go first?
You go, Soph.
I'll go. Well, I'd worked with Nick before, with Kelsey actually as well. So that was kind of nice because we already had a kind of proven partnership. And then, oh yeah, Nick and I were actually working on a different film, which COVID kind of killed back in those fun times. And then this sort of came out of that. So he sent me an early version of the script I feel like 3 years ago, something like that. Yeah. So and one of the wonderful things about working with Nick, as I'm sure the others will agree, is he's super collaborative. So it was very like, give me your thoughts, and he would edit accordingly and just sort of like be very open to feedback and discussion. So yeah, that was a really exciting way to come into the project, I guess, because it felt like I got to come in really early and have quite like a voice, which was nice. So yeah, so that was how I sort of joined.
Yeah. It was actually pretty similar for me too. I had worked with Nick a couple of times, one of those times being with Soph. And Nick just sort of we we go rock climbing together occasionally because we live sort of near each other, so we go bouldering. And he just sort of floated. He was like, "I've got a script, by the way, like if you want to read it," and like very casually. And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then I read it and loved it. And he was like, "Yeah, so Sophie's on board. What do you think about playing Charlotte?" And I was like, "Okay, fantastic." And then I kind of came on board at that point and got to sort of then help develop Charlotte a little bit from there on. And like Soph said, it was just super collaborative and really fun being in it from the early stages because got to A, sort of have a say in some script stuff, and B, have loads of time to sort of really digest and think on the characters and sort of their relationships and Charlotte's backstory and everything like that. So yeah, it was really cool.
Right. I was also working with Nick on a different film. I was a World War II film, so very, very different. And we just finished the shoot, and I think a week later, he messaged me and he said, "Hey, actually, oh no, actually on the set of the film, he said he's writing a script right now, and maybe after I can read it." So I was like, of course, yes, because I loved working with him on that feature that we were doing then. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to work again. So show me what you've got. And I read it, and he didn't really tell me which role he was thinking about, but then as he kept on sending me different drafts, it kind of made sense. I was like, I kind of guessed it. So yeah. We also kind of saw different drafts like you guys. I guess I came in a little bit later, but as he developed the characters, it became quite clear which one I should be playing.
Definitely clear. Okay, Kelsey and Alina, you have a scene where you're like handcuffed to each other. So how do the dynamics work? Like, how do you make your co-star comfortable playing a scene that intense that takes, I assuming, more longer to shoot than we actually saw it, and it's a long scene on screen. So I want to know the dynamics. How do you and your co-star get familiar and comfortable with each other doing a scene like that?
That was that was so funny. I just felt like the whole time, honestly, I was really worried about hurting Alina somehow, but you were just such a champ. Like I remember you just being like, "No, just drag me. It's fine." Like and because there was when we were shooting it as well, there was sort of we were toying with the option of the kitchen in the house is really, really long. And you sort of see the scope of it in the film, but in person it's even longer than you think it is. And
Wow.
we I can't remember if we did it or not at this point. It all blurred into one. I was dragging you around so much, Alina, but there was a world at some point in which I was gonna just drag Alina across the entire kitchen floor and that just be like one long take. Um, that got scrapped in the end because I think the distance of the kitchen was just too much and it would have literally added like 10 minutes to the film. Um, but I don't know, we just sort of like got scrappy with it and jumped in, didn't we?
We
Really?
had a rehearsal for it
We
where we got
did.
a little bit of a feel for what it would be like. And I think my biggest concern was because I was lifting a lot in the gym for this character. I was like, I'm gonna be heavy. Like she's gonna have to drag. And so we had the handcuffs on her in the rehearsal, and that was really the problem, not so much pressure on like one spot.
Mm.
We tried to figure out ways how like Kelsey could grab and how I could kind of help pushing a little bit without camera catching it. But yeah, it was fun. I lost a lot of hair. That
Yeah.
was about it.
Yeah. I just remember trying to get you around the corner of the kitchen island at one point, and that I was very stressed at that point because I was like, how do you can't bend yourself round, you just have to be limp. So I was just sort of like trying to maneuver you around. But yeah, I'd forgotten that we had a whole rehearsal for it actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that was the whole thing. I ended up holding Alina sort of like that and putting most of the strain on sort of hand grip rather than the actual cuffs because that was painful.
Okay, Sophie, when we first meet Danny, it's an introduction. It's through, like these neon filtered video snippets. This is our first introduction, and we are seeing the world through Charlotte's eyes. So I want to know, how did you and Nick work on creating that entrance, these videos for Danny
Hmm.
to, I think, add to her mystique as a character?
Yes, I think so. We actually had like a whole separate shoot day for that, which actually was, I want to say, like a month or something before the main shoot, which was actually very helpful because that's authentic kind of to the timeline of the story, right? That like she has this fully developed world before Charlotte enters and before the relationship with Charlotte kind of shatters everything. Um, and I guess what's interesting about the like that is really that we see her business mindset, right? The whole point is these images are to tantalize. They're sexualized, of course, but she's just saying like, here's a taster, come and like get behind the paywall. She's not giving anything away. And so I think it was like Nick and I thinking about it like a brand, like marketing, coming up with some concepts. So like there's like the image where I have like petals and there's lots of neon. So there's like a really clear visual language. Ultimately, it's the same as any other marketing exercise. It just so happens that she's marketing her body and sex. So that was kind of really interesting because I think it can of course feel quite like intimidating to be like jumping into that kind of world, which is not a world that I'm in myself. Um, and actually stepping back and being like, what am I really doing? What's Danny's approach? She's quite calculated about it, and she reduces it to it's a business. It's a business. So that made it creative, but for that kind of like had a clear objective, I suppose.
I think because of what you said here and started the conversation, Sophie, I would like to ask the three of you, how do you think the film kind of like comments on our image obsessed world and the influence that social media has had on relationships and image and people's dynamics, and even everything is for sale and everything is kind of like a trap or a lure for the other. So I want to hear your perspective, the three of you.
Shall I go? Shall I just power through? Yeah.
For it.
Um, Yeah, I guess that's a lot what I particularly was thinking about because I bring a lot of that energy into the film initially, before it kind of explodes. I think for me, it's still so much about like image obsession, but specifically in relation to female bodies. That was such an early like intrigue of the film for me that it's reflecting the contradiction of a culture that is both like hungry for like images of women for sexualized content, but is also like simultaneously dismissive and disrespects women who actually capitalize on that for themselves and take agency over that. So I think like it just still reflects that dynamic of it feels like the patriarchal gaze tells you to like be pretty and smile, but when you start to like generate income for yourself or you have more power, I guess more actual agency, um, then like you're doing something wrong. So I think the image obsession for me that the film really like hits on is about reducing women to still images rather than full flawed, ugly sometimes humans. That's, I think, and that's not so much the social media aspect. I think social media is like an engine of that, but the culture is there regardless of social media, I think.
Yeah, I also think that it might seem a little bit over the top how they have this competition, but reality is if we see how social media has changed over the years and now it's now given space to these platforms like OnlyFans, there is really that competition between content creators to go like above and beyond and do even more and more and more to get attention. And the more popular social media has become, the more you have to do that because otherwise there's just so many out there. So they will always come up with new things to like outshine each other in some way. So I do think that that is quite, yeah, I think that what's shown in the film is obviously it's taken it to an extreme, but it does mirror that quite well. I also think that the whole money aspect of it, and I've noticed that quite a lot. Nowadays, people don't really want to take regular jobs because they see that potential of making a lot of money online and it seems easy. And why would you work a 9 to 5? It's like I can just go online and like take my iPhone and then do these kind of things. So I think there's a lot of, yeah, a lot of young people really drawn to that aspect of it.
I agree. What you're saying there about the sort of like it seems extreme with the competition, but it's actually like a quite a clear representation, I think, of um, the sort of corrupt system of it all. It almost feels like the dynamic that happens between the girls, sort of like it feels like a really interesting conversation between exactly what Sophie was saying with the balance between sort of finding power and autonomy in yourself and your own body, but then when that's churned into sort of this capitalist, social media fueled, numbers fueled, patriarchal, overridden society, it is then still churned out in a very corrupt way. And I think this film, it sort of feels the sort of, I don't want to say too much about the film, but like the violence that comes from it feels very metaphorical about how corrupt and poisoned it can become, even in whatever way you especially as women um, might find to take power and control over yourself in that system. It still manages to sort of like spit it out in a very violent way again.
I think also like the kind of pressure that you're both talking about is like that's the context of the film, right? So even if like we don't know that fully, like it helps inform the psychology of the characters. They're coming in with that level of pressure of like I must be this, I must compete with this. And so I think like you say, like we don't necessarily see violence all the time in real life, but there is a kind of like internalized psychological violence
Yeah.
that is happening from from that context, I think.
And I would also like to add just how I think the film shows how lonely these people really get from doing that.
Mm.
It is we have all these like thousands of followers sending them stuff, but really they're very lonely people. And I think the film shows that quite in a quite interesting way. They're all loners. They're all out there like fighting for themselves in a way, putting themselves at risk in many ways and like trying to, I guess, tell themselves that it's okay and trying to come up with reasons for why they are there. But yeah, you can tell that they're quite lonely people.
I
Yeah.
agree. It also feels like the house, Charlotte's house, kind of like traps these women inside, that they don't see a world beyond it. And you can feel the loneliness of the human spirit trapped by the screen and by the competition to appear in the virtual world rather than going out in the real world. So this is what I want to ask you. Like, how did you interact with the house itself? Because the house felt like it was both a beauty and a prison. Like, it's a very beautiful house. It's very attractive and kind of like seductive, even, but it's also a prison that imprisoned these women to, we don't want to spoil, but some of them actually kind of like it was like a permanent prison. So I want to ask your perspectives on that house and the dynamics inside it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because certainly from my perspective, playing Charlotte, like the house becomes an entire character in and of itself. The house ends up representing all of Charlotte's struggles with her family, with her whole life, and sort of power in her own life from the beginning, because that is the one thing that's cause is the catalyst for all of this is she's trying to keep the house, and she's in trying to do that she's trying to keep her life and keep some sort of sense of self, And it just feels like you're exactly right in what you said. It feels like as the film goes on, the house sort of grows and morphs into this prison and cage, and it's almost like a fight ring in the end for survival that the house is sort of, yeah, that it becomes.
Yeah, I think also just you start to add a lot of people in a space like that, and you are like conscious of the proximity of a lot of humans. Um, and like this is quite an intense project, and it was quite an intense schedule. So it's also like balancing that loveliness of having this lovely cast who you want to go out with, you want to make dinner with, you want to like we were pretty close to the beach, you know, but you also like I need a minute. I need some of my own personal space because I need to like, you know, draw a nice boundary between that abusive character and my actual humanity kind of thing. So I think that's interesting in a space like that. Just like you start because when I first got there, it was just Kelsey, you'd finished filming, hadn't you?
Yeah.
Your sister and yeah, so I think it was just us. And so like it was quite quiet and then you start adding in more and more people. And again, kind of authentic to the story, right? Because we're chucking in people. I knew Kelsey. I didn't know Alina, Isadora, or Sophia. So like you're meeting people like there's a kind of synergy between the off-screen story and the on-screen story that like this is real. Yeah, I don't know what I mean by that. I guess just that it's that sense of a house becoming more and more full and the world becoming more and more full. And we see that in the film, it becomes quite overwhelming.
Mm.
I think the house is a nice way of kind of looking inside of, yeah, some people who have this kind of wealth, how they can get kind of lost in a big house like that. Like she owns the house, but there's nothing personal in it. Doesn't feel like a home. She
Mm.
doesn't feel safe there. She didn't even realize it's not hers. Like I just feel like a lot of that once again is just yeah, showing the loneliness of this person. Yeah, I felt the size of it is that creating all that space between people once again, it just doesn't really help connection. She feels very disconnected. She's disconnected from her family, and like the house shows that as well. Just yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right as well. Like with the aesthetic and the style of the house, like it's not giving family home at all. It's very like some parts of it feel almost like clinical, like squeaky clean, and like you say, it was very stripped back from any sort of personal touches or anything like that, which was a perfect representation of where Charlotte finds herself in the world and where she's coming from in her family.
Kelsey and Sophie. When we see Danny and when we see Charlotte, it's quite different in the beginning from how the relationship progresses. I would like to say that Danny kind of like preys on Charlotte's innocence and naivety because Danny is kind of like the savvy, worldly person, while Charlotte is this completely sheltered girl from what we see. But then things progress more, and you could feel like even Danny progresses even in the way she interacts with Charlotte. And there is a hint of underlying power, probably the emotional power and the emotional toll that Charlotte has over her. I want to know, how did you two work on your relationship of the characters together?
I mean, it's so interesting the journey that you're describing because I think that is like when I was first working on Danny, I was like, oh wow, like she's really a bit different from me. This is a challenge, this is fun, but wow. And I really had to kind of like lean into her directness, right? Which is not and you know what's the beautiful thing about being an actor is you always learn something from like any job or from any character. And I guess it was just really thinking about God, like where does that worldliness, that not apologetic nature come from? And actually, I think it's about like really being calculated about what you care about and what you don't care about. And Danny gives no energy or airtime to her haters. She just doesn't have time for them. She doesn't let them have power over her. She doesn't entertain guilt or doubt. This is very much like the place that she's coming from. But that is quite like a guarded place to be. And obviously that's what starts to unravel as like when she first meets Charlotte, she's still in that kind of guarded place of like, I know I have power over other people, they do not have power over me. And as they start to like develop a bit of a relationship, like Danny allows emotional connection to happen. And if you allow emotional connection to happen, you are embracing vulnerability, which is an amazing thing. But I think it feels like for Danny, because it's almost been so long since she's done that, it feels like it's such a scary thing. And so the vulnerability is super heightened, and therefore some of her reactions when she's not feeling as secure are more extreme. But I feel like it was just such a lovely like relationship to work on with Kelsey. I think partly because we'd already worked together, so we felt very like clear on how each other operated and very safe to kind of like I felt like we really experimented. We were very present, I think, with just like being like, what's the other person giving me? I'm gonna really embrace that and change and not come in with too much of a plan.
Yeah, I feel like what was really nice about it was that it felt like we both did a lot of inner character work ahead of the shoot. And
Mm.
then my sort of perspective was like, I know everything about who Charlotte is up until this point and where she's at emotionally and how vulnerable she is. She's really impressionable and really vulnerable. And then I basically, my aim then was to just let Soph come in and affect that in whatever way that Sophie was going to come in with Danny. And it felt like a really organic progression then. Like I knew that from a psychological level, um, looking at the script, that Charlotte was going to become sort of enraptured by Danny. I always sort of saw it as like almost like when a cobra hypnotizes someone. And sort of Charlotte just willingly steps into being hypnotized because at first Danny's her savior, and that's what Charlotte is desperately looking for at that point because she's been completely abandoned by her family. She's seen as a failure by her remaining family, and I'd sort of done this backstory in my head where perhaps her father, who has died, was the only person who maybe believed in Charlotte's ability to take up a place in the world and become, a fully functioning human rather than sort of like a grown up adult child, which is essentially where she's at the beginning of the film. And so with all of that stripped away, and then at the prospect of losing her house, her home, when Danny comes in, it's like, oh my God, my savior. And here you are with so much power and so much understanding and gravitas of who you are in the world. And you see something, you want it, and you go get it. I need more of that. And then it's this um infatuation, I think, that develops, and it's this infatuation with Danny's autonomy, but then it is also the infatuation with Danny herself, or who Charlotte thinks Danny is anyway. And I think it's interesting because in the middle of the film, I feel like there's a glimmer of an actual relationship between them.
Yeah.
And it's like what could have been if everything was
Yeah.
healthy. Then it's all, of course, pushed to absolute maximum extreme. And what I always felt that Charlotte gains from Danny is, whether it's morally good or not is out of the question, but what she gains from her is a fierce survival instinct. And that's the change that Charlotte gets, I think.
Well, she also gains power over Danny, and I feel like in realizing that, it affirms some of her self-worth. That is like someone like Danny, who you admire. Oh my God, she also loves me. She will also do anything for me. Like,
100%. Yeah, 100%. And that also like builds Charlotte's self-esteem
mm,
just enough, but it's not in a healthy way, especially again when you add the context of it all into it. It's all sort of it all leads back to a sort of validation that Charlotte's craving that isn't full or whole in any way, and so of course it goes very wrong.
Totally makes sense. Okay, Alina, when you see Fabi, she brings a different vibe to the function. Her entrance is like, wow, okay. And she's also a businesswoman too, but she's kind of like a very, very shady, kind of like layered person when you first meet her because her introduction, I believe this montage was just gorgeous and really done to kind of like throw you off guard. Like I've seen enough, okay, with Danny and then with Brill. So also Abby is going to be like this. How did you approach her, especially because she appears later into the film?
Hmm. Well, I thought with her, I split it in like three different. Her character, I think, had three different aspects that I really wanted to work on, and one was obviously the languages. So it was languages, it was the character itself and her background, and then as she mentions like health and fitness a lot, there's a scene cut out of it where I play tennis, so we had to like work on that. So I really wanted to make sure that she physically fits what she's talking about and coming from a professional background in tennis. So I just wanted to make sure I don't judge her. I think that was the most important working on her, was just to go in there and not judge her and just really find what could motivate somebody to go to that extent. And I think once you find that as an actor, and once you find the empathy for your own character, it doesn't seem that crazy. And her entrance doesn't seem that crazy. That's just what she needs to do. That's her, and that's what she needs to do to be in this world. And so I didn't see it as crazy. It's like, yeah, that's.
And how did you see her?
Mhm.
Yeah, sure, continue, definitely. Yeah. Yes.
No, I mean, I think that's just who like the world has shaped her to be, you know? And I think a lot of what she talks about in the way that you might pick up as crazy, actually really tragic things. And when you really listen to it and you like take it apart, what she's talking about, this woman has been through a lot. But I think we can see that for sure. And I think all these women have it in common. They're very intelligent. They're very intelligent characters. Maybe, okay, maybe to judge, maybe one of them is a little sleepy. Maybe that one not so much. But the other women, I think, in it, they're quite intelligent women. And yeah, like I said, not everybody's dealt the same cards in this world. And that's just how they went about it and gained their power back.
And her relationship with Brill is completely different from what Charlotte and Danny has. I don't think the relationship is fully developed in front of our eyes, and it could appear like it was purely physical. But I want to know, how did you see their dynamic and their relationship together, at least for the brief moment when they hooked up in the house?
I think she's been very, and I've mentioned this before, I think Fabienne has been really lonely. I think this is the first time for her having like a teammate. I think it's very intriguing to her. In general, all these girls have their walls up because they're just very careful people. So I don't think they like it's very hard for them to open up to others. And you guys can tell me if you feel wrong, but I think she's very intrigued by the whole thing, and it's a completely new experience for her. So I think I tried to put like hints of it in it. Like there's certain looks in the film and stuff where she's just like, wow, okay, this is a thing. Like I can do this together. As somebody who's just like me, you know, I feel like she's for sure felt like somebody who doesn't fit in with anybody else for a long time. And like suddenly she's surrounded by people who are weird in a way, like her. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Okay. The idea of an all-female cast, because I interviewed a lot of films with an all-female cast, and to me, it's something very empowering and also very wonderful to witness. How was it like? Was it your first experience, or were you in other movies where it was just the cast, at least, was all female?
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
I mean, like short films, maybe. I feel like that's a little different. Um, I mean, look, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I feel like we can get really focused on like all female or all male. Like ultimately, you want a group of great people. We were an all female cast, but we had a male director. Like it's I guess it's exciting. Fundamentally, it's exciting to have strong, like, female characters who are full humans. Like, unfortunately, I feel like, I mean, you guys can say for yourselves, but I still feel like I get a lot of characters, or I still sometimes play a lot of characters that don't feel, fully developed, that feel surface level. And I think we see a lot of that on TV still, and that is something that particularly affects women more than men. So ultimately, what was really exciting about this film was to have well developed and particularly I do think flawed, because I think often if you have a fully developed female character, they're some sort of perfect, wonderful deity, and it's really nice to not be perfect or good. Actually, it's really nice to be a bit evil. Speaking for my character. So yeah, I don't know that it struck me so much that it was an all-female cast, more that it was good female characters, I suppose.
Yeah, I would have to say pretty much the same thing there, actually. I think the thing that strikes me about it, and that struck me at the time, was how great it was to play these like massively flawed characters. Like
Mhm.
no character in this film is perfect or glorified and romanticized in their imperfections. Because I think that's often what I see is that it's like
Pixie
flawed
Dream
female.
Girl.
Yeah, yeah, literally. And it's like the flawed female character, but it's like romantic.
Yeah.
And it's sort of sparkly. There's no
She's the
sparkle.
outsider, but if she takes her glasses off, then she's incredibly beautiful. And
Yeah, 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 yeah. And she's like just so traumatized and like, but that's like really cute.
yeah.
Like, and it's just like there's none of that. Like there's some real stuff in this film, and these women are fighting,
Mm.
and Charlotte is speaking, for myself, like Charlotte, she, in terms of Sophie saying, it's fun to play evil. Charlotte's not evil. And you could probably speak much more on the concept of evil anyway in the context of Danny, but she's not evil, but she's so flawed, and
Yeah.
she makes so many terrible choices in this film, and it's just so real because it's like why like it's nice to play a character that isn't sort of the writing doesn't attempt to justify or glorify the bad
Mm.
decisions.
Mm.
It's just, no, this is a human being making a terrible decision because what the hell would you do? Kind of
Mm.
thing. And she's muddling through. And of course, she's making these decisions because this is where she's come from. And it's the same for all of the characters, and they all sort of display it in a different way and in their own way. And that was what was really juicy, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever worked on a film where it was a like all female cast, and I do think it is a bit of a different dynamic for me personally. I thought, especially that there were quite revealing outfits and we had to be in like certain ways. It did make it a lot more comfortable for me personally. I just didn't really like have to think twice. I was just like, oh yeah, this is fine. Like, ooh, like I don't know. It just made me feel a lot safer, but also I love being around women. So it just made me feel really comfortable. Not that I don't like being around men, not at all, but I just think there's something really nice about just girlhood, being around girls. And it made me think a bit more like about sleepovers with friends and stuff. It's just nice. So I really enjoyed that part of it. It made it fun and like would it have been different if there was a guy in the cast? Maybe, I don't know, but the experience I had just filming with girls was really good. So I will see. I have no other comparison to it yet, so maybe it's not always like this, but I guess we were really lucky.
Mm.
I feel like the presence of a male character would have shifted the dynamics completely, whether for the good or the bad, or even like in a different, like it would have shifted the dynamics itself in the film in a weird way, like maybe in an unexpected way. So this would, for me, would have been a completely different film.
Oh no, I think it would have changed the story massively because I just honestly feels um like men are irrelevant in the film in a funny way.
Yeah.
Very.
Like really is. Patriarchy is relevant, but men themselves are not like that kind of patriarchal like setup of women are sexy and men might pay for sex. Like that's the setup, but that's about men and women being caught up in that psychology, not about men themselves. This is all, yeah. And I think maybe thinking about it now, there is like a specific competition that sometimes exists between women. I mean, actually, I feel like probably we have that in our own like personal careers as well. You have that. That I think the film sort of touches on as well. I think also everything that we're saying misses out that it's a really fun film. Like we were also being really silly, and there's like really fun montages that, as Alina's saying, like actually like being able to really play and be quite free physically to like be silly and mess around and dance and do all of this stuff that like was quite liberating. And yeah, the environment might have been different if it hadn't. I mean, ultimately, that was a very safe environment that, and that was just the people that were there. But yeah, it's it's a very fun film. Like I think we shouldn't underestimate that as much as it touches on all this stuff.
Yeah.
And visually beautiful too.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, Nick really knows what he's doing. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the costumes, that was like I felt super envious because everyone else got these amazing costumes and the wigs. And I was so envious. Like I loved my little sort of like gamer outfits and it was super comfy and my little ankle boot. But like that every day the girls would come out in like some other incredible outfit with the wigs and I was like literal heart eyes, like please, I'm dying to actually I did try on a wig at one point. I think I forced Jordan, the our amazing wardrobe lady to let me try on some wigs at one point because I was very envious.
Okay. My last question to the three of you, which was the most difficult scene to shoot? And maybe it could be a scene that as a viewer, it would be like literally easy. Like it would be the handcuff scene, for example, or not a violent scene for Danny. But for you, it's really difficult. And I would be like, okay, really? Was that difficult? So I want to know a scoop.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, this is not really too much of a spoiler, but like the boat was quite tricky because you've got one shot, by the time if you're in the water, you're wet, you can't undo that very easily. So like there was a certain amount of pressure to get that right. Sort of performance wise, angle wise, we were quite far out. Um, I'm a good swimmer, but I'm not a huge lover of the ocean. I have been stung by jellyfish, and I was just like making sure that I needed to, not react in a way that was me, but react as Danny. But at the same time, you don't know how you're going to feel when you're in and also like again I don't think this really spoils too much but like I'm left quite alone for a moment and it's quite a strange experience to be quite far out and have boats zooming away from you and you're like, oh well, they could just go, here I am, there they are. So that was definitely yeah, I guess hard because it was higher pressure, and like I say, like we had one take on that, so yeah, that would
But
be my choice.
it's really funny that you say that because that was literally the first thing that came to my head as well. I was like, no, that boat shot.
Yeah.
Because we had one chance.
Yeah, because you had to push me right as well, like all.
Yeah, and we just so we didn't get to sort of properly rehearse. Like we sort of we blocked it out and made sure it was safe and everything, but we didn't get to rehearse it fully until the shot. And so that the shot was it. And so that was nerve-wracking. It was also really fun. I also remember though as well with the bow, the other challenge with it was I remember at one point Nick trying to get a shot and he was on another boat and we were
Yeah.
on the boat and they just kept drifting.
Yeah.
And that getting that because they couldn't even if you put an anchor down, it's the sea. You're gonna so that was also a challenge. But yeah, it was all very fun and exciting to do. Also, any time that you have to act like something's heavy when it's actually not, I always find funny as an actor as well. Being like, oh, with the
Yeah.
heavy thing that we won't name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are my two, probably.
Yeah.
My most difficult scene, I think, was, well, when Fabienne speaks directly to camera about her background story. Well, Nick didn't tell me that he was going to cut that up. So it was like 3 full pages of a monologue that I had hammered into my head. And he wanted it quite at some speed. He wanted me to basically have no breaks, like speak it at it. And we shot it a few times. And it was quite intense. And now that I've watched the film, I was like, I could have just done a voiceover. I'm glad I did it because it was like, but it was a lot and it was quite all over the place. And obviously she like goes a bit like she goes really into it. And yeah, we were doing it. He was like, can you do it a little bit faster? And I was like, okay. So I think that for me was, and I think that was my first day of being there.
Wow.
All right, we got that out of the way. It was fun. It was fun. But yeah, difficulty wise, I think probably that was the hardest part.
Well, Kelsey, Alina, and Sophie, thank you so much for this thought-provoking conversation. Honestly, we said a lot of interesting things. Didn't just talk about film, but art in general. So thank you for your openness and for your time.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Sophie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Those
for
are great
having us.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.